Welcome in to Flag for Discussion, episode 14 for Monday, July 14th. A lot of 14s there. I'm so glad to be back on this show. Jace, you did a great job last week on your solo pod. I'm very appreciative of you doing that, but I'm glad to be back here with you, back here giving out my takes. We got a really fun show.
It was a fun solo pod, but I'm glad to have you back.
Hey, solo pods are really intimidating, but they give you a chance to see, test out your mettle in podcast form, I guess. But for everyone at home who doesn't care about that, we got a really fun show planned for everybody. If you care about the Big 12, it's been dubbed all these kinds of different things, whether people hate it because there's no massive team in it, or people love it because there's no massive team in it and anyone can win the conference. It's a really fun conversation to have. We're going to somehow try to give you our Big 12 conference takes and predictions. Jace has his Wild West tiers. I gave my Big 10 seeding chart last week. Jace will give out his Big 12 Wild West tiers, tell us how he sees the Big 12 stacking up this year. And we're going to try to get into some conversation about that, go through the Big 12 conference odds, go through essentially, like I said, where teams stack up. Before we get anywhere, follow us on Twitter at flag F4 discussion, on TikTok at flag the number 4 and discussion, YouTube flagged for discussion. We are finally posting on TikTok. It's been a fun last week just seeing how that goes. I've had friends who I haven't heard from in a little bit reach out because I'm on their For You page, which is still a mental block that I'm trying to get over, because obviously doing a podcast, Jace, you're expecting to be in front of people, especially as you grow.
Yeah.
But for me, it's still a little weird.
I feel like we're still obviously new and young enough that it's not common for us to be any sort of media outlet post kind of thing. And neither of us are big social media posters. I feel like we'll do, our fiance picture for engagements, that kind of stuff. But outside of those kind of posts, we don't really post much. So it's weird to see us on the internet in that way.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm mainly a retweeter. And then on on Instagram, it's like you said, it's big life moments or anything. I'm not posting as much as I did when I played baseball in high school, and you got those fun pictures from every game. None of that matters. Jace, Big 12 media days are going on. It's officially college football season in many ways, at least we're talking about 2025 college football. I mean, you guys at home don't have to listen to whatever takes or segments Jace and I come up with. But on that note, Jace, we're going to come up with a segment. You have your Wild West tiers. How do you see the Big 12 stacking up? First, explain the tiers themselves and go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So this is a Wild West themed. Unfortunately, with realignment, there's some not Wild West schools like UCF in here. But, I feel like Big 12, Texas, you got some Wild West Cowboy themes going on. I mean, there's the Cowboys in the conference. So I have 5 tiers.
It works.
Tier number 1. Yeah, it works. It's all right. 5 tiers. Tier number 1 is the Outlaws. They're the most dangerous. They control the town. Everybody's scared of them. They're the top dogs. Next, I got the Sheriffs. These are people that you still have respect for. They still have a lot of power. They still have control in this town, but they're always a little fearful of the Outlaws, and they're trying to catch them. The third tier I have is the ranch hands. They do their job. They wake up early. They go to work. And some of the younger ranch hands, they'll work hard and they'll find themselves to be sheriffs, or maybe they like to get devious and become an outlaw. But these are solid programs that are going to be in this ranch hands tier. My tier number 4 is the Saloon Extras. They're in town. They might work at the post shop. Nothing wrong with that. But, they're not the Outlaws. They're not the sheriffs. They hang out at the saloon most of the time. That's where you're going to find them.
They're there.
They could be frisky. They're there. They could be frisky. They could also just be there. That's kind of where they exist. And then the final tier, tier 5, these are the Tumbleweeds. They're blowing through town. There's no real presence. No one really thinks about them. They make for a great scene in a movie. They make for a great 42-0 loss in a big team story. Unfortunately, that's the Tumbleweeds.
My favorite one is the Saloon, um, the Saloon Extras, just because they're anywhere from potentially crazy people to just the person everyone in your town loves, and they're just reliable. They will always be there, never gonna hurt you, but never gonna succeed in any major way. Um, why don't you start off by your fifth tier, Tumbleweeds?
All right, we'll start off in tier 5 here. So I have 3 teams, the first one being Cincinnati, the second one being UCF, and the third one being Arizona.
I think you
Cincinnati,
cut out
come
before
on.
you said your third one.
Well,
No,
thank
you're
you.
good. You're good.
Arizona hanging out at number 3. 3 teams, all new to the conference. 3 teams that I don't think were massive college football brands before coming to the conference, and in their short stints, each one respectively, haven't done anything to make you feel like they are going to be a big dog program. Of these, I don't mind. UCF is probably my tumbleweed that's most likely to not be a tumbleweed next year. I think Arizona is my most likely to be a tumbleweed again next year. We will have to see, though. I was curious if you, I know like Scott Frost is kind of frisky for us Oregon guys so far, but I'm curious what you think about Scott Frost and the tumbleweeds.
I mean, I'm more curious than anything about Scott Frost. I I don't think you can fall off extremely as hard as he necessarily did in Nebraska. But then there were some decisions that they made in game at Nebraska that we weren't fans of, and then clearly he became a meme. We don't have to relitigate everything, but Nebraska could have waited 2 weeks and they wouldn't have had to pay him extra millions of dollars to fire him. It's not like that program was going anywhere that year. They decided, no, we got to get him out now. So they added millions of dollars to his buyout to get him out of there. So he's become a meme, but he was also beloved at UCF. It's also a different college football, but we'll get to it. So go for I'm excited to see what the rest of these are.
Awesome. Okay, so tier 4, these are the Saloon Extras. I got 4 teams hanging out here. We got Houston, we have Oklahoma State, we have Kansas, and we have Colorado, which I thought might be a hot take there. A lot of media members I feel like are really high in Colorado this year. We'll see. I'm obviously not so much, but it is what it is. Then in my tier 3, the Ranch Hands, we've got 3 programs hanging out here. We have BYU, we have West Virginia, and we have Baylor. West Virginia was the one I thought maybe people might thought that was lower. When we dive into these schools, I'll give you all the takes and reasoning here. All right, so now we're kind of getting into the top half of the conference and some of the bigger dogs here. We have tier 2, the Sheriffs. There are 4 teams hanging out here. We have Texas Tech, Kansas State, TCU, and Utah. And then in tier 1, the Outlaws. They're all scared of them. They're all chasing them. It's the 2 that played in the Big 12 championship last year. It's Arizona State and it's Iowa State. That is my Wild West of the Big 12.
Okay, there's so much to talk about here. I gotta start with your tier 5, where you got UCF, Arizona, and Cincinnati. I mean, Scott Satterfield's a great coach. I just don't know if Cincinnati's ever going to be huge in this. And for those at home, we should probably point out we're not making predictions. Like his tiers aren't for the next 10, 15 years of these programs. It's for hi producer Harper. His predictions are for 2025 Big 12. So where these teams stack up this year. I UCF, I don't know really what to expect from them. Gus Malzahn, obviously, he left to become an OC. Arizona, I completely agree with you. They are probably undoubtedly one of the worst, if not the worst teams in the conference.
Yeah.
Just a team that came in with so much hope last year and under Brent Brennan after Jed Fish left, and it just
Terrible.
didn't work out. So, but I really want to know more about how you feel about your Saloon Extras, man. You got Houston, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Colorado. I could make arguments for each of these programs that each of these programs should be higher.
Okay.
So
we'll break them down here.
I want to hear your take on those.
All right, so I'll start with Houston. I really like the direction they're going to go looking forward. Willie Fritz is entering Was it year one. Willie Fritz is entering year one at Houston. Year two, we were just talking about that. Year two at
We were
Houston,
just talking about
coming from Tulane. That's right. That's the Mackay Hughes connection when he left Tulane. But okay. I won't give all the schools because I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. But Willie Fritz is one of those people. Like, he's not like one of those guys that started under Saban and like grew a bunch. He started at like some school I've never heard of, rebuilt them to be a powerhouse at their level. Then he went to Central Missouri, rebuilt them to be a powerhouse. Goes to Sam Houston State. They were never a powerhouse, obviously, at the FBS level, but very formidable in their conference. And then he went to Georgia Southern and turned them to be really formidable in their conference, winning numerous conference championships at each, like throughout it and at each step of the way. And then he was phenomenal at Tulane before coming to Houston. They have Connor Wagman. He did not pan out last year, former 5-star, kind of big name QB. Year two for him, maybe they figure something out. I really like the direction they're going in the future. They have 2026 Keyshawn Henderson, number 2 quarterback in the country. He'll be coming in. So I like the future they're going. But as you mentioned, for the 2025 season, they have a lot. They had not a great roster last year, had a lot of roster turnover with graduation and transfers out. They're going to be a patchwork with a bunch of not high name transfers outside of Connor Wagman. That doesn't usually go incredibly well, especially in a conference going to be as tough as this one. But they were probably the team I most considered putting up a notch.
Houston itself, I mean, I forget what the kid's name is, unfortunately. I'm sorry at home. But they brought in a really good tight end, too. He was at Wisconsin for a cup of coffee for Just Spring Ball comes in. Houston is really interesting because Willie Fritz does make things work. So if they were suddenly the surprise team of the Big 12, I wouldn't be shocked. But at the same time, I don't mind where they are. Oklahoma State in the Saloon Extras, I do want to talk to you about that because they obviously have a lot of program turmoil this past year. They're bringing in 41 incoming transfers. They lost a couple of big guys. Dejon Stribling went to Ole Miss. Kendall Daniels went to Oklahoma. They lost a lot. Mike Gundy, the last 5 or 6 years, maybe it's completely wrong, but it feels like he'll have mid-year, bad year, really great year, and there's no way to predict it. So I don't really know what to expect. They do have a quarterback battle with 4 teams. I have four kids out there battling for that spot. So who knows? Who knows who's going to win that? So I would almost be accept you putting them in the 5th spot too, in your tier 5.
Yeah,
Kansas.
that one came down to where do you see Mike
Go ahead.
Gundy hanging out? The Saloon. He seems like a Saloon guy anyway. So I was like, all right. And I feel like he's an interesting enough coach. He gets enough attention. Like I'll throw him up in the Saloon for fun.
I actually, if that's your reasoning, I would support it even more. Kansas and Colorado, those are the big hitters. I think that most people might disagree with you on, especially seeing a team like maybe Baylor, West Virginia, especially because I thought West Virginia should be maybe tier 5 for this season under Rich Rod. I'd love, like I said, I want to hear where you're coming from, but Kansas is bringing back super senior quarterback Jalen Daniels, who has had issues, but also has flashed for that program. And there's a reason they were excited that he was coming back. Lance Leipold, he's never going to make the preseason coaches to watch out for. He's never going to make the news with something he says, but he's just consistently great. And everywhere he's been, and then he's also resurrected that program. I almost would argue that Kansas should be able to move up.
The reason why I held back on him is Jalen Daniels is back. He was really good 2 years ago. He was not so good last year. There were some injuries, and he kind of was playing through injuries, but he wasn't great. The passing game was really bad last year, and they have an all new wide receiver core. They lose their top 3 receivers, top tight end. Like 80s, it was like 80 something % of their receiving production is gone. They didn't really. They're going to rely on low level recruits, 2 stars, walk ons, and then like middling transfer portal guys who didn't play much at like Memphis. like that sort of wide receiver core. I don't know if I like a Jalen Daniels who's coming off a struggling year with all new production around or new guys around him that haven't produced elsewhere. You also, I feel like last year Devin Neal carried this team on his back to a 6-6, or I believe that was 6-6 season. He's gone too, and they don't replace him with any level of running back that gives you confidence they're going to get that kind of production. So if they're 6-6, and I'm not bought in on Jalen Daniels, and I think they got worse around him, I'm just not sure if like he's going to be able to have a fully healthy season and carry this team beyond 5-6 wins. And they also are one of those unfortunate teams that have a tough Big 12 schedule this year.
Right. I don't mind that. I just think if we're betting on certain teams to show their steady hand, it's a Lance Leipold team over Rich Rod. I'm sure he's going to build a good West Virginia team, but West Virginia, I think, at least for this year, I have no problem putting them at the bottom spot of the Big 12, which only means if I say that they're going to win the Big 12. But I almost trust Kansas more. It's been
that's fair.
16
if
minutes.
There's a coach to do it, Lance Leipold's that guy.
And I think there's a better Lance Leipold in many ways at Kansas State, which I don't want to say because both Kansas fan bases will either revolt or be super happy that I said that. But it's been 16, 17 minutes into this podcast. We haven't mentioned Colorado. Like you said, a lot of people... 12. I mean, you brought them up, obviously, when you were going through these, but Colorado was a hair shy of earning a spot into the Big 12 title game last year. Some things had to happen. Some teams had to lose. But if it went down that way in the last week of the season, they would have been in the Big 12 title game against ASU, I believe. Obviously, Shador's gone. Obviously, Travis is gone. Obviously, they've lost a lot of pieces and they're replacing. Like you said, a lot of people in general are down on them for this year, but some people, we've listened to podcasts and we've talked about it. Some people think that they're about to be the toast of the town and Deion's going to show how good of a coach he truly is. And like you said many times in the last couple of podcasts, like this is one of the prove it years for Colorado. Why is Colorado in the 4th spot? Are you just that much of a disbeliever in Caden Salter and the replacements, or because in many ways this is year 2 of Jordan Seaton, who came in as a true freshman 5-star tackle, had a good year last year, is growing. Compared to previous years, Colorado didn't really attack the portal as heavily under Deion like they did the first 2 years, almost signaling that they like the roster that they have coming back. Why is Colorado in your 4th tier of teams in the Big 12?
Yeah, it comes down to I think people understate how good Travis Hunter was last year, because I think a lot of people like to clown him. I don't know. He had some cringy moments, and it was he was flashy, so people like to clown him. But I think people underestimate he was their best defensive player and their best offensive player.
Right.
Also the best offense and defense player in their conference on both sides of the ball. He won the Heisman. I don't think replacing that is going to be super easy. They also had their defense is what kind of saved them last year. A lot of people think about their offense, but offense was very hit or miss. And I think they kind of benefited last year. They didn't play Arizona State. They didn't play Iowa State. And they did not play BYU until the Big 12 championship. They didn't play in the regular season. And instead, they got like the Oklahoma State, the Kansas, the UCF, the Cincinnati, and the Houstons. And so I think they looked inflated last year because they put up big games in all of those. They almost lost to North Dakota State to start the year. They also lose their 4 leading wide receivers. You lose Shedeur Sanders. True freshman quarterbacks very rarely pan out to be really good year 1. Or Caden Salter, who I think was really good 2 years ago at Liberty. Then he had to come into a Liberty team last year who they had like all new transfer O-line, all new transfer receivers, didn't have a run game, and he really struggled. He's coming to a Colorado team that lost all 4 receivers and replacing them. They lose 4 O-linemen. They return left tackle Jordan Seaton, but same thing as last year. They now have 4 transfer O-linemen, none of them very highly rated. That went horribly last year. I don't see why it's going to go any better this year. And you put that with a quarterback who I think is lesser than Shedeur without a run game again. And now they do play Iowa State, Kansas State, ASU, and BYU in the regular season. much tougher schedule. I think there's going to be a lot of regression out
there. I don't disagree with you. But I think you just confirmed my belief in them. Colorado's just one of those teams that you would think in the general progression and rebuild of teams, this is the year they take the next step, but it's just so hard when you are relying, and this is what we've said year after year, on transfer recruiting instead of if Dion and company decide year one, we need 25 freshmen, we need 30 freshmen. I think they brought in like 6 to 10. And at that point, like that is where at least the base of your team is. That is where the floor of your team is. Where their team is right now is sure their ceiling could be a Big 12 title again. Or could be competing for the Big 12 title again. But at the same time, I think their floor is so low as well. It's like I don't know how to even describe it. Colorado has a ceiling of 9 to 10 wins maybe this year, but they also have a floor of 2 to 3. Like most teams in the country don't have that wide of a range, in my opinion.
And they start the year off playing Georgia Tech, which that's going to be no slouch. I mean, that's Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, Eric Singleton. It's a tough team.
For a team that is still trying to build their lines, Georgia Tech might be one of the last teams outside of like the big boys that you want to play because Georgia Tech is just so physical. There's a couple more conversations we want to have. I really like your Baylor pick in Tier 3 because I think that is about where I would put them. A lot of people might argue they are going to be bad again, but they really started doing well towards the end of the year last year. A lot of that was Sawyer Robertson picking up and learning the offense finally. A lot of that was Jake Spavital, the OC, figuring it out. I like that spot for them because if they continue building on what they were building towards the end of last year, sure, you could argue they're going to be higher up than this. They're going to compete for the Big 12 title. But if they fall back down to earth a little bit or start struggling a little bit more, they have a wide range too, like Colorado, but I don't think it's as wide as Colorado. The two that I disagree with in this tier, West Virginia, and I don't think you disagree that much with my take, is
no, not at all. I see what you're saying with West Virginia.
Future-wise, sure, this is a great place, great school, really fun fan base, really fun when West Virginia is good. It's just they brought in, our doc says 52 transfer commits. I think if you ask Rich Rod, he might say he has like 60, 70 new players. I forget how many he actually said. But they brought in a lot of new kids. And it could all end up panning out, but it's a lot of kids in 1 year to try to turn into a team. And we'll have to see how that pans out. BYU, and we have to be I'll get your take on West Virginia and BYU, but we have to be sensitive talking about the BYU situation, not necessarily the team, but the quarterback situation. Obviously, for those at home who haven't followed, Jake Retzlaff had a sexual assault allegation against him. His lawyer and him pleaded that it was consensual, but basically, at any other school in the country, as long as it's consensual, they obviously with the allegations there would be issues. But after him and his lawyer argued with that, the case ended up being dismissed. And you would think at home, oh, Jake got off with one. Unfortunately, because him and his lawyer had admitted that it was consensual, at BYU, you are essentially admitting, like at BYU, you're going against the honor code for consensual sex, and whether I don't for premarital sex. I don't want to get too much into that. It's really sensitive. Obviously, the charges and allegations were dropped, but at any other school in the country, without these allegations, with just consensual sex, you would be fine. But so we can push that aside. he's not going to be at their quarterback this year. Why are BYU and West Virginia in your tier 3 still?
Yeah, like first thing I got to correct one mistake. I said Eric Singleton Jr., wide receiver, Georgia Tech. He's at Auburn now. I meant Eric Rivers. He's the other. They had the two Erics. I got the wrong one there. I'll start with West Virginia. Honestly, I totally understand the West Virginia at the bottom, and I think a lot of people will have that. 52 transfers and 60 to 70 new players is pretty unbelievable. I don't have an excuse for the offense. That's just going to be Rich Rod has kind of that power spread offense. It worked really well at Jacksonville State the last 2 years. They were some of the better teams in FCS. They have a really good running back that I think will fit that style, and Jaheim White. He played last year, had a good season on a pretty lackluster offense. But what I'm really excited about, and the reason why I think West Virginia is going to be a lot better than people realize, is their defense. They bring in Zach Alley from Oklahoma. And we've talked about Oklahoma last year. That was a 6-6 team that had one of the worst offenses I've ever seen, genuinely ever seen for the course of 12 games from a Power 5 school.
They didn't know where to throw.
Yeah, and Zach Alley single-handedly shut down Jalen Milroe in Alabama. Kalen DeBoer, they shut them down. They won that game. They also bring in Jamori Robinson, who is the AAC Defensive Player of the Year, and out of I think not UTEP but UTSA out of UT San Antonio, and they also return all 4 starters. Yeah, I almost said UTEP. I was like, I know it's not that. They also return all 4 defensive line. Thank you, defensive line starters, and all of those guys were on the conference all-team list. They had 1 on the first, 2 on the second. So I think that this is a really good defense. And when you give a really good defensive coordinator 5 game records on the D-line that have played, 4 of them have played together, that's problematic. And there's a lot of question marks at the quarterback position in the Big 12 and the O-lines. So I do think that gives them an upper hand in a lot of games. They have a solid defense around that D-line. It's nothing crazy, but when you're getting to the quarterback in 1.5, 2 seconds and you're shutting down the run game, it does make your life in the secondary a lot easier. And I don't know. I kind of feel like Rich Rod might have some magic in him. He's had a good run at Jacksonville State, and I feel like he fell so hard the first time he was at West Virginia and then went to Michigan, and he fell just nothing went well for him. I feel like I just have some faith that he's going to turn around this time and figure it out. I think they're going to be the frisky kind of 7-5, 8-4 team that nobody saw coming. But I could be completely wrong on that.
I don't doubt that Rich Rod will get them in a position to win quickly. I just don't know that's going to be this year. I don't know if you have anything to say about BYU or if you want to move to tier 2.
Yeah, I'll jump on BYU here. I've just been rambling. All right, so we got BYU as our last ranch hand. I guess they're first on my list. Farboat already mentioned, but Jake Retzlaff is off the team. Just barring off the field stuff, just talking football between the hashes.
Yeah,
that's a huge loss.
I'm sorry. It was a really weird way that I explained it, but essentially he's not on the team anymore. The allegations have been dropped. But you got to be sensitive talking about this stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot we have no idea what actually happened and what's going on in his life and what it's meant for that. But from a football standpoint, big loss. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the conference last year. You also, when you go this far, they didn't make any plans at QB because you're we have this kid for at least 2 more years and he's a stud. You lose him, and it's not like they lost him in the spring portal, so they had time to figure it out. They lost him within the last week or 2. And that's really late. They're going to have to look at a QB. They're essentially going to have to find a QB on the roster. None of these guys have playing time experience or anything of that nature. So it's going to be a very interesting fix there. You also lose your maybe not your star receiver. Chase Roberts is back, and I think he had the most receptions and yards, but he's much more a Hunter Renfrow kind of guy. But you lose Keelan Marion, who is your big play, over the top, 50-50 ball guy. You kind of need those. They return LJ Martin, who's a very solid running back. They've talked really highly on their tight end, their O-line room, which I think is why they're the top ranch hand. Ranch hand's a good place to be. I think it means you're a hard worker, you're a good team. But they're also relying on entirely transfers, and players that have never started to take on O-line and tight end responsibilities. They're confident in them, and that's nice, but that's can be a little bit difficult sometimes. And then you lose your 4 defensive line starters and your cornerback 1 and cornerback 2, who had a combined 10 years of experience at BYU
Oh
and
my
accounted
god.
for 10 picks the last 2 seasons. But they also returned probably the best linebacking room in potentially the country. So they're one of those teams that like extreme at these positions in a good way, extreme in these positions at a bad way. I think it'll meet in the middle around like that 7-5, 8-4 kind of area.
I just I agree with you with like 90% of that. I just wonder if look, you could lose a kid. If your best player was a safety and you lose him, that hurts big time. If your best player was a receiver, you lose him, that hurts big time. Quarterback is the most important position in all the sports, and you lost your best player, who was your quarterback, after spring ball, like you mentioned. That might tank their season this year, not their future, but their season this year. Um,
Yeah.
I do like where you have them. I do wonder, however, if they should be tier 4, maybe even 5, because we don't know how the gap will be filled at this point of the offseason. With Big 12 Media Days happening, we don't know.
Yeah.
We'll try to get into, by the way, before we get to your sheriffs and outlaws and we have that conversation, I got to thank you for doing the Big 12, because I'm going to have notes and comments on each of these, but you have reasons for each of them to be right or wrong. And the Big 12 is so hard to make a tier list out of, because you could essentially put them all in one tier. Um, on that note, I think tier 1 and 2 could essentially be combined, because I'm shocked that
Yeah.
you don't have your TCU in tier 1. I'm shocked that you don't have Kansas State in tier 1, where a lot of people have them. It's such a divide in this conference, because I'm shocked Utah is not in tier 1. It's such a divide in this conference because uh, everything before tier 2, you could say, yeah, they're probably not going to win the conference, but they might. They might be able to compete for it. Tier 2
Mm-hmm.
and 1, you expect Texas Tech, Kansas State, TCU, Utah, Iowa State, and Arizona State to all compete for it. Now,
Yeah.
I like ASU as much as anyone. I love Kenny Dillingham as much as anyone. They lost Cam Scatabo. I like. I. How much of that is going to be a? How much of that is going to hurt them? Do you think?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in Kenny Dillingham, and they returned both Marcus Arroyo and Brian Ward, both coordinators who were both phenomenal last year. They also returned Sam Levitt. He was a great sophomore quarterback last season. A lot of people have high expectations for him this year. He had high expectations out of high school, and it didn't pan out for him at Michigan State his freshman year, but it's looking like it is at ASU. And they also returned their star receiver Jordan Tyson, who was one of the better receivers in the country last year. And that duo, them two, in terms of production, was a top 20 duo in college football last season.
He
Both back
also
a year
was.
older.
He also was out for the Texas game and the Big 12 title game, if I remember correctly. And
Yeah.
that, like, I know everyone has revisionist history and just assumes Texas should have beaten them anyways, but they barely lost to Texas.
Yeah, that 4th and 13 late in the game that they gave up to
Right.
Texas was brutal. But they also returned 68% of their starters outside of the guys I just mentioned. 4 of them on the offensive line. Second team all conference tight ends back. I think this is a team that they were really good last year. They had a lot of momentum. They return a lot of that momentum back, especially in the coaching staff. I like what they're building. I like where they're going. I can't losing Cam Scatterboot stinks, but I think like running back production is one of the easier spots to fill if you're a team. And I think
For an
that Sam
offensive
Levitt
coach,
taking that
especially.
jump. Yep. And I think Sam Levitt taking that jump from sophomore to junior year as like a second year starter now, I think that'll mask a lot of like what they missed in the running game.
So I like that you have them back in tier 1. I do think they should still be in tier 1. I don't necessarily think that last year was a fluke, like some say. My camera's not focusing. Oh, I'm back. I don't think last year was a fluke, like some say. But at the same time, I wonder is there somewhat of a return to earth moment for them? Just because last year they were picked last and to finish last in the conference. No one really knew who Sam Levitt was, but now he's a known commodity now. Um, there's just more to expect, and it's no longer their first year in the conference, so there's probably more of an ability for their conference mates to scout them and show and see what they would look like against the Big 12 competition.
Yeah.
Iowa State as your second tier one team is interesting to me because I do agree with you that they should be expected to do big things in the conference. If you we talked about this before the show, they have the seventh best odds to win the conference according to FanDuel. They're at plus
Crazy.
1,000. It's great value because if you're a Rocco Becht, Matt Campbell believer like we both are, damn, you got to look into this team was in the Big 12 title game last year.
Mm.
I don't know where odds makers think they have us stumped and are trying to make money off of us, but I'm sure they have a reason for it. I see big things coming for Iowa State.
I do too. So also like Arizona State, a lot of returning starters. Iowa State returns 14 of their 22 starters from last year. Rocco Beck's a big one, and both running backs, Hanson and Sama, are back as well. The toughest part about Iowa State that makes me the most nervous about them is that you do replace your 2-star receivers, Jane Higgins, Jalen Noel. Got to make sure I get them right. But you do replace them with two something I do like that Sal from East Carolina, he does have a lot of production. He has a lot of film. He's played a lot of games. He has good stats. Same thing with Townsend from UCF. A lot of games, a lot of stats. They've looked good on film, but they haven't competed at at the elite level yet. Obviously at ECU and UCF, both offenses were all right, and so you're kind of making the most of your situation. But now they're in a much better situation. You're with Matt Campbell. You're with Rocco Becht. You have a good O-line. You have a good running game. You return like your stud tight end, Gabe Burkle. So a lot of returning production, which I really like. And then kind of a cool story from this offseason when NIL was kind of a big deal. There was 20. Matt Campbell had said he had 20 players that returned and took less NIL money than they got last year, so that they could come back and win a Big 12 championship. They got smoked by Arizona State in the Big 12 championship last year. And so I think they're hungry. I think it's a team that's been there. They know what it takes. They know what it takes to get there. That's also kind of why I have them in Arizona State. They played in it last year, and they return a lot of key pieces, including coaches, quarterbacks, star players. I like the continuity when you're on the top, and also Outlaws. I think when you're the Outlaw, you got to be scary a little bit. And if you're the two teams that play in the big game, I imagine teams got to be afraid of you.
Yeah, I can't believe the odds on them.
Yeah, the plus 1,000 is
nuts. It's nuts. There's two more teams I want to talk about before we make predictions and look into odds and really get into more take-heavy stuff. But I want to talk about Kansas State and Utah. Mm-hmm. Kansas State, for me, last year they were in everyone's tier one of the Big 12. Everyone said Texas and Oklahoma are gone. This is now Kansas State's conference essentially run with how good they were expected to be, and Avery Johnson with how good everyone expected him to be. What do you just not predict a big jump for Kansas State? Because everyone in this conference is theoretically capable of doing it. I'm wondering, where is Kansas State, where they got a great head coach, they got great pieces, they were still a really great team. Where is your line deferring Kansas State and Arizona State and Iowa State?
Yeah, so they were obviously a step below the Arizona States and Iowa States last year. Kansas State, I'm not a big Avery Johnson believer. His best year, in my eyes, was still his freshman year. I think we're still waiting. I keep hearing year after year out of Kansas State that just wait for Avery Johnson. Just wait. We've waited so long. We're down to the final out of Avery Johnson here. And I'm not sure I'm bought on him. He hasn't bulked up at all. He's still really tiny. He's been injury prone his whole career. And then I also think their last year, a huge issue they had was their secondary. And a lot of their secondary is transferred out or left for the NFL. or just, I guess, graduated. I don't think they made it to the NFL. And they've replaced that with just a bunch of meh portal guys, like guys who were unranked out of high school and who were like 2-star transfer rankings per 24/7 Sports. No one that jumped out, nobody that was highly sought after. And your defensive back room in a conference that's going to have Sam Levitt, Josh Hoover, how do you say his name, from Texas Tech, Barron, right?
Yeah,
And
I
then you're
think
going to have
that's right.
Sawyer Robertson from Baylor. Yeah, there's a lot of good quarterbacks, and if you're going to have a bad secondary, you're going to have a tough time beating those teams. And you're going to need Avery Johnson to do a lot. I don't see him doing a lot. But I still think they're going to be
See,
good, but Kansas State seems to be an 8-4 lock every year.
that is crazy to me because I would take this year to be the Avery Johnson step up year. I think last year was almost a fluke of anything that can go wrong will go wrong for that team. Do you remember that BYU game? They just got destroyed before they were down. I forget what the score was. It felt like it was like 24-0 before we even knew it. Obviously, Avery Johnson has to grow to meet his hype, but I would expect Kansas State to be up there. The second team I want to get into real quick, Utah. Now, here if anyone's been listening since, it hasn't been that long. It's only been 14 episodes, but almost since the beginning of our pod. When I had a solo pod, I picked Utah as my wild card in the conference. I would stick with that. They brought they have Devin Dampier. They brought in quarterback from New Mexico. They brought in the New Mexico OC. Dampier's not going to throw you out of the building. He doesn't have that kind of level passing. But at the same time, my apologies, my dog was sniffing things. At the, at the same time, Dampier is one of those quarterbacks that you just, if it clicks, it'll click. Utah's been so down at the quarterback position, meanwhile having such a really good offensive line, defensive line. They have first-round picks on their lines. If their skill positions are up to par and Dampier is up to par, I'm not saying he's going to be a Heisman contender, but for me, they're the wild card. If Dampier clicks, they're my pick to win the conference. They just have every piece, so it's interesting seeing them in your tier 2, but it fits.
Yeah, tier 2 is still a really good tier, by all means necessary. That's why you're there with Kansas State, Texas Tech, TCU. I'll just piggyback onto you with the Dampier. That's a big reason. I think, like, in the world where Utah wins the conference championship, which I think is a very possible outcome,
They
Jason
have the top
Beck
odds right
and
now.
yeah, for good reason. Jason Beck and Devin Dampier, like you said, if they pan out and things go well, they could be filthy. And it doesn't feel like a transfer scenario, like you said. It's your offense coordinator that you just had previously coming back with you again. And then they also bring in two interesting running backs. So Nate Johnson was a Utah running back 2 years ago and was a very solid running back. Transferred to Vandy and was really good for Vandy. Comes back to Utah for I assume a final stint at Utah. He a great quarterback. Obviously didn't play with Jason Beck, but he did play with Kyle Whittingham, so he's at least got some familiarity with the program and with the coach. And then they also bring in Wayshawn Parker, who is a highly touted running back at Washington State. They use running backs in a weird way, so he was more of a passing game guy, but that works out well. Nate Johnson is more of a downhill runner. Now you have two complementary backs with a dual threat quarterback and an offensive coordinator who wants to use all of that. So there's a world where those things go super well and things pan out for them. The one fear I have with them, usually they are known to have these beast defensive lines. They lost a lot of defensive line talent last year. They didn't have a lot of high recruits to backfill, and they didn't do much with the portal. They're going to be very thin and not very deep at both those positions. And then they're also probably their weakest position coming into this year is their cornerback position. Similarly, not a lot of talent that came in, not a lot of talent that was already on the roster, and you're also very thin there. They're an injury or two at both of those from starting people they don't want to start, and that makes me a little bit nervous. They also returned one of the better linebacking rooms outside of BYU, so they're an interesting defense.
I I I'm almost at the point where I want to trust Kyle Whittingham blindly, but almost because you sympathize with Cam Rising did some great things for that program. He brought them to winning the Pac-12 title, going to Rose Bowl. But the last couple of years has been like they've been in Cam Rising injury hell, and they've had to rely on so much of his health. So they had to rely on his health in order for them to be anything good. Isaac Wilson wasn't great. They had another quarterback who played. He wasn't great, and they had all the pieces around that though, and it still wasn't enough to like overcome the quarterback issue. So I'm just almost hopeful that Devin Dampier and Jason Beck are the guys, but I guess that'll lead us right into our expectations. So we've seen how you stack teams up. Who's your Big 12 champ?
I wrestled
This is
between
binding,
two.
by the way.
This is binding. Okay.
No, no, it's
My
not.
my original I guess we should right before the season. I guess we should do our official like genuine. We can't give two names, give one name, everything. Because right now, I think Arizona State is who I think is most likely to win it. Like if you were asking me to be an odds maker, I think ASU would have the least favorable odds for you as a bettor. If that makes sense. But best odds to win the conference. TCU is where I will actually be putting my money to win this conference. And
I
for the
like it.
fun of it, I'm going to be picking TCU to win this conference. I will let you go first, but I have my whole TCU spiel. I've been waiting to share on this podcast. Big 12 time is finally for it. But first, give me your
Why?
who you think is going to win it.
Why do you think when we were going down the list, I didn't bring up TCU because I was like, I know that's going to be the conversation, and I was just going to give you the floor when we got to
I love
TCU.
that.
My,
You're too.
I have Utah winning the Big 12. I believe in Devin Dampier. I believe in Jason Beck. I believe most importantly in Kyle Whittingham to revive that ship. And whether that's, I don't know if this is Whittingham's last year at Utah. Every year it feels like those rumors get stronger and stronger. I just think they built that team to compete in the former Pac 12 that at that point had some very strong um, foes to go up against. Oregon State was being built up. Oregon, obviously, USC was up and down. Washington was really good. They were built to beat those teams, and they did. They caught up to them. They're solid on the lines. They're solid defensively. Like you said, there are some spots that they can't afford any injuries this year. But I also don't think that's a deal breaker in this conference. I think this is a team that if the offense gives the defense a chance to win the game for them, because Kyle Whittingham's not the coach that's like, I need my offense to score 45 to win the game. I need my quarterback to throw for 300. He's the guy that I'm going to run the ball. I'm going to take use play action. I'm going to take plays where we can get them, but we're just going to try to matriculate down the field. We're going to be explosive when we can, but Kyle Whittingham's not going to put all the pressure on Devin Dampier to be a Heisman Award winner. He's going to try to get Devin in the best possible position to get them to win the game. And I think Utah in general, I don't know if I would put money on them because they have the best odds to win the conference. But at the same time, I think that I'm so excited to watch this team actually pan out because I've been picking them to be so good for so long. So my pick to win the Big 12 in 2025 in July is the Utah Utes.
I like that pick a lot. This could be the first time in Utah history that their offense has to carry their defense, and it might happen. But if we know one thing about Kyle Whittingham, you and I could be out there as in the secondary, and he would find a way to make it work. So I do like the pick. I think they
I
have
would
a
have a
very high
couple of return
floor, very high
touchdowns
ceiling.
too. I would have a
14
couple of
hit
return
sticks.
touchdowns. Yeah, absolutely. Kyle Whittingham would scheme me up on special teams, and somehow I would score.
It's like the Mike's Way memes, but with Whittingham. Just do whatever you need, Mike Whittingham. I'm ready for it.
I'm ready. Go for it.
All right, TCU take here. TCU time. I'm starting with my guy. I've said his name so many times, Josh Hoover. I'm all in on him. He's the reigning gunslinger, QB1, most passing yards in the conference. Going into his third year as a starting quarterback at TCU, he returns his main wide receiver, Eric McAllister, 6'3", 205. I say main as in for the last 6-7 weeks. He didn't play the first couple, and he was a beast when he came back. They fit perfectly. McAllister is a 50-50, go up and get it, just give me a chance kind of receiver. And Josh Hoover is, how can I throw this football 70 yards? Someone just go figure it out and catch it. They work well together in that regard. They returned Bud Clark, one of the better safeties in the conference from last year. That was a guy who had a chance to either go be like a day 2 NFL draft pick, or he could have popped in the portal and probably went to like a Georgia and Oregon and Alabama, Michigan, and just went for a ring. He decides to stay at TCU, which I think says a lot about what he wants to do. They're also going into year 2 with Andy Avalos. They had a really good first year as Andy Avalos, the defensive coordinator, last season. They averaged 24 points per game, which is slightly above average in the conference. But the last 7 games, they held up 4 of the 7 opponents to under 13 points in those games. They really started to turn it on late. Like I said, they returned Bud Clark. They also returned Caleb Alarms, or I hope I'm saying that his name right, and Namdi Obizior, but also hope I'm saying your name right. 2 really good linebackers with all conference mentions. 2 guys that I think could pan out to be even better. And then they also bring in the Washington State sack leader, Ansel Din Mabua. Also, hope I'm saying your name right. And then freshman All-American Zach Chapman, defensive end. So the defensive side of the ball, I think they are going to be much more improved under Andy Avalos. They return the studs. They bring in another stud. And then offensively, I mentioned there were Hoover and McAllister. And they also bring in Jordan Dwyer, who was a 1,000-yard receiver at Idaho last year. And in Idaho's 3 FCS playoff games, he had 130. I actually had him pulled up here. He has 134 yards in game 1 with a touchdown, then 166 and 2 touchdowns, and then 189 and 2 touchdowns in the FCS semifinal matchup against Montana State. So in the 3 biggest games of the season, he showed out, showed a lot of growth. Now he joins Eric McAllister on the outside for this TCU offense. I'm really excited for this program. Their Achilles heel, because I have to say, I have to be fully honest with you all. Running the ball was a struggle for them last season. They were one of the bottom teams in the conference, and that hurt them. There was a lot of leads they blew late last year because they couldn't run the ball for first downs. They did not do, in my opinion, enough to shore that up confidently. They're going to try to do 2 running backs that they hope can, one from last year, one from the portal, they can figure it out. I don't know if that was enough. So if the run game's an issue, it's tough to win football games that way. But there's my TCU spiel I've been holding on to for so long.
I know we said that these picks aren't binding, and by the time we get to a week or 2 before the season, we'll make our binding picks. But I feel like after that, that's got to be your pick, man.
It will be.
I mean, God forbid nothing happens between now and then. That's a great pick. I know how much you love them. And by the way, the value is pretty good. They have the 6th best odds to win the Big 12, plus 800. Look, this is a conference that anyone can win, and I know we say that about every conference, but realistically, the Big 10, you might pick 3 to 4-ish teams that you can realistically see. The SEC might pick 4 to 5. The Big 12 has
I'm doing we have the odds here pulled up.
Yeah, the Big 12 has like 9 teams that if things pan out, you could expect them to have a shot. So I pick Utah to win. You pick TCU to win. The other question I think everyone has right now, Texas Tech. So they're kind of the new kids on the block of, we were a good team, an average relevancy program in a big recruiting state, but we always lost the recruits to Texas, Oklahoma, or Texas A&M, like the schools in the area. In what way do you think Texas Tech is priming itself? Are you a Texas Tech believer in general?
I am. I don't think they're going to win the Big 12 this year, believer, but I'm a believer that they're going with the big money oriented focus right now, and I believe it's going to work. Joey McGuire seems like a great coach. They returned Baron Morton for his fifth year next year, and he was one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. They also returned their O line and your top three wide receivers. When you're doing that, like you're obviously the continuity on offense is going to be there. You already had a great offense last year. You're bringing it all back again. They also brought in Quentin Joyner from USC, didn't play a lot. He only had 63 carries, but he averaged 7.6 yards per carry, almost for 500 rushing yards. Also can receive out of the backfield. So I
He
think that
has
adds a
a
good
he has,
element to them.
Quentin Joyner has big pop potential this year in the Big 12 for Texas Tech in that offense. Um, Sorry to interrupt you. I One thing I forgot to mention is the conversation. A major part of it about Texas Tech has been because they are in being that mid-relevant program. They have two former offensive linemen that played for the team who have gone on and become billionaires. So they're pouring in money into the program, which is great. You want to see that happen for big programs, um, whether they're blue bloods or new bloods, whatever you want to call them. But Joey McGuire is one of those coaches that I think is a lot of people don't see a lot. A lot of people underrate. I think he's a really good coach who's just lost out on really good players, and he was been one of the best Texas high school coaches for the last 20 years. One thing I've been reading about him more and more recently is even up until now where they have the new money to go and actually close on recruits, they were always one of the first teams to offer a kid, find a kid. And then that's when 24/7 would go and find, oh, that's a 4-star, that's a 5-star kid. That kid would eventually have the conversation with Joey McGuire. Sorry, I love Lubbock, I love Texas Tech, but I got to go to Texas. I got to go to Ohio State. I got to go to Bama. In that form, they're putting a lot of investment into the program. I guess you'd say they brought in a ton of transfer talent, like you said. Um, they brought in a lot of money in general. Where they last week they signed reportedly a commit Felix Ojo, offensive line 5-star kid, to a massive contract, and they have even more money coming down the path. I'm rambling. I'm sorry, but I guess my question for you is: where is Joey McGuire's job safety if they're not a Big 12 contender this year? They're not building necessarily for right now, but they also, with the way they're recruiting, they're expecting to not only compete right now, but not only become a national champion contender in the future, but also I'm assuming they're expecting to compete right now.
I think so. They definitely put the money into the D line that would make you think they're competing now, and the money to retain all of their offense. But Texas Tech, I think to Joey McGuire's benefit, Texas Tech is a program that hasn't enjoyed a whole lot of insane success. They've had a lot of really good players, and they've had a lot of offensive output, and they've been mediocre at the end of the season, like record wise, and the fans and the school have been okay with that. So I think Joey McGuire has the patience where he can have a down year, so to speak, and people would still be willing to hear him out, especially with how good he's been recruiting for the class of 2026 and class of 2027. So I think he's got his time bought, because it's also, I think they're going to be the same thing where I think it's set in stone. Their offense is going to be one of the better offenses in the Big 12. The defense is going to be the big question mark. But I think, like I said, when they had Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, they were putting up 500 yards passing, and they would score 65 points, and they would lose. And like no joke, they would lose. They would like lost that one crazy OT game. But
That's one of
things
the
like that
craziest
happen.
YouTube highlight clips you'll ever see, by the way. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you so much today, but that is
No,
one of the craziest YouTube highlight clips of if you ever just Patrick Mahomes versus Baker Mayfield you could ever see. But I agree with you. There's growth potential there. I know I cut you off, but the concerning part for me is that it's not the fact that they've they're used to not winning a ton. It's the fact that all this investment's coming in now, so there's more expectation. And I was listening to a podcast today with Joey McGuire on, and I thought he had a really good point. They were asked about his job safety. He was asked about his job safety. He was asked, "I know you love your job. I know you're doing a great job. I know you brought in a ton of talent, but this new investment. What do you say to the people who say this new investment for you into the program might make your seat a little warmer if your goals aren't met this year?" Joey McGuire's answer was he was the one he was one of the decision makers who chose to go all in. So if he essentially saying I'm going to stand by my decision, and if it was wrong, I'm going to stand by the mistake. And I can't complain if my decision itself ended up being wrong, or I ended up coaching poorly off of my decision. So I really liked. He's such a fun listen on podcasts and such a
Yeah.
fun coach to root for. So I just hope that Texas Tech is good, but I wonder, because of the new investment, how safe is his job if they 8-4, 9-3 in the first year of this new Texas Tech rise.
I think it's pretty safe. I think he'll have the patience. I also think it's safe to say they're going to be good. I think their offense is going to be too stellar to just not at least win 7 games. I think the defense is legit. I think they win 7+ games almost guaranteed. And I think anything 8 wins and above is for sure like, okay, yeah, let's keep this thing moving, especially with how well he's recruiting. Because a lot of that money did go into this past transfer class, but it's also gone into future recruiting classes. And like you mentioned, Joey McGuire is so well known in the high school Texas circuit. He's always the first guy to find talent because people come to him and like, hey, I know this kid. You need to come see him. He's got too many connections in the state of Texas. He's too well orchestrated in Texas. He's also really well liked in the whole state. I think you mentioned he's a good listen. The Andy and Ari podcast, I assume, is the one you were talking about because he was
Yeah.
on that, and he was phenomenal. He was super nice, and he was also a very pro player, and you could tell it wasn't forced. Like they were asking him about the kids, and he's like, when kids tell me that, sorry, but like Bama's offering, he's like, I'm the first person to say, absolutely. Like,
Go
he's
for
like,
it.
it sucks and I hate it. I wish I could have him, but he's like, I'm not going to tell a kid to not make what's a decision that's best for him. He seems like a genuine person, and I'm like bought into. I think he's kind of sealed in a positive way, sealed his fate that he'll be there for a little while. I do think they're kind of foolproof, bad proof mentality. Like I don't think they're going to be bad this year.
One of the ways I've talked to you, or we've talked to each other about, like, you can depict when to fire somebody is how fast would they be hired again. And I think even if he wasn't hired as a head coach in college football right away, can you imagine how fast the University of Texas Sark would be like, yo, I need you to just be my consultant, be my, like,
Yeah,
I need you part of my program. How fast Texas A&M will pick up the phone. Maybe he would go back to coaching high school ball. I don't know, but he would get a job right away, and that is a sign that a team like Texas Tech should build with him rather than use him as a scapegoat if this year they're not exactly where they need to be. I want to get into
agreed.
a couple more things before we close it out. So we're going to stay in the Big 12. Let's talk about the commissioner. Like we said at the beginning of the show, it's Big 12 Media Days this week. There's a lot of people talking. Every program brings in a coach, their head coach, and a couple players to come talk to the media, answer questions, basically introduce the program to the media for the year. So Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, came out, and he always has the initial conversation about the programs in his conference, the conference outlook, last year, all that jazz. He basically introduces the conference for the year, and he was asked about the college football playoff model he prefers. And for those at home, spoiler alert, he prefers the 5x11 model, not the automatic qualifier model that the Big Ten prefers. The reason for that, and for anyone at home who doesn't know, the AQ model is, I think you and I talked about this like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I like the AQ model because I think it gives defined rules to what makes a college football playoff uh, entrant team, right? But the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 now don't like that. And part of that is because they want the 5x11 model. So there's no definite qualifiers. You don't have to win your conference or become third. And the Big 10 doesn't get four. The SEC doesn't get four. It's here's the 5 conference winners and then everyone else. So without rambling too much, and we got to get you to bed because it's late for you. The Brett Yormark came out and said, we want to earn it on the field. It might not be the best solution today for the Big 12, but long term, knowing the progress we're making, the investments we're making, it's the right format for us, and I'm doubling down today on the 5+11 model. A lot of that is, as we've talked about, they don't want to sign a piece of paper with the Big Ten and SEC saying, you guys get more qualifiers than we do, and we agree to that. So that essentially is us saying we are less powerful and inferior than we are to you. What is your reaction to what Yormark said? And it's now it sounds like it's just the Big Ten against all the other conferences.
Yeah, I liked a lot what he said. I think number one, I just like it. I like what it means for how he feels about his conference. He's always been kind of a showman. He's kind of good in that regard. I also thought he's always maybe not the best in terms of a balance sheet commissioner, but I think he's the best commissioner, and I always feel like he's the most realistic. He fights for his conference the hardest, and he like cares the most, which is kind of what I would classify as the best. So I've always considered him as the best commissioner. And this is kind of why I think like his confidence in his programs, the confidence in what he's building, it shows a lot, and I think it proves a lot about like how he feels about them. But I also think it makes the most sense for them because in the automatic qualifying, the AQ model, I think he knows that by relinquishing 4 and 4 and admitting you're not as good, you definitely diminish the way that recruits and transfers are going to view your programs versus the Big Ten and the SEC because you are putting pen on paper to say we are not the top 2 conferences. There are conferences better than us, and you definitely don't want to sign that statement saying that. And I also think he knows why would I relinquish 4 spots to each, knowing that these flawed committees are just going to give those extra spots to the Big Ten, the SEC, anyways. Why not at least make them earn it? And I also he's made a lot of comments of he's like, I want all of my teams and my teams want to schedule the SEC. We want to schedule the Big Ten. Kind of putting the ball in their court almost. He didn't outwardly say that they don't reciprocate or they don't try or they don't want to, but he definitely put the ball in their court by coming out saying that. I do like the growth that the Big 12 is showing. Like I think he's right. I think short term maybe not the best model, but long term I do think a lot of these programs are on a really solid trajectory. I think they've done a really good job with coaches, and a lot of these schools have a lot of wealthy alumni. NIL is really going to help a lot of these schools out versus some of these other Big Ten SEC programs. I like the direction they're headed, and they have a lot of Texas schools that have money. Like you mentioned, Texas Tech, they could build their name for themselves. So I think this is the right move. I think it was the right move, like technically. I think it was the right move emotionally. I also just thought it was kind of cool for him to like stand up for his programs.
Right. I think part of that is the Big 12 is night and day different than they were when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving. I think there's just hope that some program where right now it's a little weaker or everyone has a chance, there's hope that some program's going to advance or elevate themselves to that upper echelon of a conference where like when you think of the Big Ten, you think of Oregon, USC, Michigan, Penn State. When you think of the SEC, you think of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma. Like you think of the best programs of that conference. When you think of the Big 12 right now, you think of a lot of good. You don't think of national championship contenders. Like you said, it's a challenge essentially to the Big Ten and the SEC. Like we're not going to ever admit to you that we are inferior. So we're going to make you go out and earn it. And I know that means some years the Big 12 might be shut out of the playoff outside of their conference champ. That is a concession we are willing to take for the ability to say if one of our programs, 2 of our programs ends up really elevating themselves in the next 5 years, well, maybe the Big 12 is all of a sudden back up into being an upper echelon conference. So, like you said, Brett Yormark is kind of fun to root for too as a commissioner, even though you don't necessarily like love rooting for commissioners in general. But he's got the big ideas, but he will go to town defending his programs and his conference. So I appreciate that. There's a lot more quotes that have happened. There's a lot more that are going to come out. Scott Frost took a shot at Nebraska, and Dion had a lot of stuff that he said about Colorado and how he plans on recruiting. And thankfully, Dion appeared healthy enough to at least be at media days. So we don't know what his health issues are, but hopefully it will get better by the time season rolls around. We're gonna save program report for next week. I think an hour and 12 minutes on the Big 12 itself is good enough. And Jace, it's past your bedtime anyways, so we got to get you to sleep. Look, the Big 12 is a whole basket case of a conference. We don't know who's going to win. We can just give our best shot at it, and that's why it's so much fun to follow. I love watching Kansas. I love watching Kansas State, and I'm gonna love watching Texas Tech. I'm the most excited to see if Jace's TCU love is real, or how if my pick of Utah is gonna work. But there's a lot that's happened. The best part of it is that college football season has essentially almost started by now, because there's actual college football 2025 to talk about. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you liked what you heard today, let's follow our socials. TikTok's blowing up right now. Follow us there at flagged4 discussion. Twitter, we're on there at F4 discussion, and YouTube, as always, flagged4 discussion. We love seeing all of your takes, all of your thoughts. All of the comments that are on our YouTube and TikTok have been kind of hilarious. There's one of my brother's friends who they're ridiculous comments, but that just means there's some engagement, and we appreciate everyone for joining us on our journey as we're growing and building this and becoming better at this. On that note, Jace, you got anything else?
TCU Horned Frogs, if you have a lot of money to throw around, maybe put a little bit of that on the TCU Horned Frogs Big 12 champions, but don't blame me if it doesn't hit. Actually, you can definitely blame me. I gave a big sales pitch.
Hey, that's okay. I might have you put some money down just for me. I'm in California; it's illegal here. But on that note, from Jace and myself, Farbode, thanks for tuning in. It's been flagged for discussion. Peace.